By the time they sat down to eat, one of the men at that table had already been paid. The money was counted, the arrangement was made. Judas had gone to the chief priest's days earlier, agreed a price, and had been looking for a quiet moment ever since. And he spent that evening reclining a few feet from the man he had sold, eating out of the same dish. And Jesus knew. That is the part that makes this meal almost unbearable to read slowly. He knew before they sat down. He says so out loud during the meal, and he still got up partway through, took a towel, knelt on the floor, and washed that man's feet. This is the story of the last few hours before the arrest. A supper that has been painted 10,000 times and is almost always painted wrong, and which contains, in the space of one evening, the most tender thing he ever did and the most catastrophic thing anyone ever did to him. Start with the room, because getting into it was an operation. Jerusalem at Passover was packed, a city of perhaps 40,000 swollen to several 100,000, and finding private space for 13 men to eat a long meal was not simple. Rooms were lent, borrowed, and shared. And this particular group had a specific problem on top of the shortage. The authorities had decided to kill him and were waiting for a moment when the crowds were not around. So look at how the arrangements are made. Jesus sends 2 disciples ahead and gives them instructions that sound like a spy novel. Go into the city, and there shall meet you a man bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him. And wheresoever he shall go in, say ye to the goodman of the house, the master saith, Where is the guest chamber? A man carrying water. In that culture, carrying water from the well was women's work almost without exception. A man doing it in a crowded street would stand out precisely enough to be found, and not enough to be remarked on. It is a recognition signal. And the phrase they are told to use, the master saith, is the same shape as the phrase used to collect the donkey a few days earlier, because the Lord hath need of him. A password spoken to somebody already expecting it. So the venue was arranged in advance, through an intermediary, using a code, in a way that meant not even the 12 knew the address until they got there. That last detail matters more than it looks. If the location had been known that morning, Judas could have told the priests where to find him, and the arrest would have happened during the meal. Instead, it happens later, at a garden, a place Judas knew from habit rather than from being told. The secrecy bought the evening. Now the room itself, and the first thing paintings get wrong. They were not sitting at a long table in a row. First-century formal meals in that world were eaten reclining. Guests lay on their left side on low couches arranged around 3 sides of a low table, propped on the left elbow, eating with the right hand, feet pointing away from the table. That arrangement is called a triclinium, and it is why the Gospel says John was lying on Jesus' breast. Not an odd display of affection, but the ordinary posture of the man in the next place, whose head would naturally be near the chest of the person to his left. And this matters because the places were ranked. Reclining order was social order, and everybody knew where they had been put. Which produces one of the quietest and most devastating details in the whole account. John is at his right. And for Jesus to hand Judas a piece of food directly, without stretching, Judas has to be close too. Most reconstructions put him at the other side, in the second place of honor, the seat you gave the guest you wished to single out. If that is right, then Jesus did not merely fail to expose the man who had sold him. He seated him next to himself. Then, in the middle of the meal, he does something that stopped the room. Jesus riseth from supper, and laid aside his garments, and took a towel, and girded himself. After that he poureth water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet. You have to understand how far down that is. Washing feet was necessary. Roads were dust and dung, sandals were open, and you did not recline at a table with the filth of the street on your feet next to somebody's face. So it was always done. It was simply never done by anyone who mattered. It was slave work, and specifically the lowest slaves' work. There is rabbinic material indicating a Hebrew slave could not be compelled to do it. The job was given to gentle slaves, or to women, or to children. It was the bottom of the household. And that is the job he took in the middle of the meal, wearing a towel, on the floor, in front of the men who had spent the last week arguing about which of them was the greatest. Peter refuses. Of course he does. Thou shalt never wash my feet. It reads as humility, and it is really something closer to panic. Peter cannot make the picture work. The man he has confessed to be the Christ is on the floor with a basin, and every instinct Peter has about how the world is ordered says, stop this. And the answer he gets is not gentle. If I wash thee not, thou hast no part with me. That is a hard sentence, and it is the theological center of the evening. Peter is not being told to accept a kindness. He is being told that there is no version of this where he keeps his dignity and keeps Jesus, that the whole arrangement runs one way, from the one kneeling to the one seated, and that refusing to be served is refusing the thing itself. Peter, being Peter, overcorrects immediately. Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. And then, in the middle of that, a line lands like a dropped glass. He said, Ye are not all clean. John adds the explanation for the reader, for he knew who should betray him. Therefore said he, Ye are not all clean. So the feet he had just washed included the feet of the man who had already taken the money. He knelt in front of Judas. He held that man's feet in his hands and washed them and dried them with the towel round his waist and said nothing to the others. Whatever else you take from this evening, take that. There is no record of him refusing, no record of a private word, no record of him even letting the rest of the room know. The betrayal was already paid for, and he washed his feet anyway. Then he sits back down and tells them what it was for. Know ye what I have done to you? Ye call me Master and Lord, and ye say well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet. He does not soften the titles. He accepts both of them, Master, Lord, and says so is right, and then defines what they mean by pointing at the basin. The authority is real. The expression of it was the flaw. And out of that comes the instruction he calls new. A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another, as I have loved you. The commandment to love your neighbor was not new. It is in Leviticus. What is new is the measure. Not as you love yourself, as I have loved you. And the demonstration of that standard had happened about 10 minutes earlier, with a towel in front of the man who was going to hand him over before morning. Now the announcement, and the reaction to it, is the strangest thing in the chapter. Verily I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. And they were exceeding sorrowful, and began every one of them to say unto him, Lord, is it I? Every one of them. Not one man turns and looks at Judas. Nobody says a name. 11 men who had lived alongside these people for 3 years, hearing that one of the group is a traitor, and the universal reaction is to examine themselves. 2 things follow from that. The first is about Judas. He had given nothing away. No coldness, no distance, nothing anyone had noticed. Whatever happened inside that man happened invisibly. The second is about the 11, and it is the more uncomfortable one. Not one of them was certain it was not him. They each thought it was at least possible that they were the one, which, given that within hours all of them would run, and one of them would deny knowing him 3 times, was a more accurate self-assessment than they realized. Then John gives us the private exchange. Peter, unable to ask directly, signals across to John to find out. John, next to Jesus, leans back and asks quietly, "Lord, who is it?" And the answer is given in an action rather than a name. He it is, to whom I shall give a sop when I have dipped it. A sop is a piece of bread dipped in the dish, and handing it to a guest was not an accusation, it was the opposite. It was a mark of favor, the host singling out someone for honor. So the sign identifying the traitor was a gesture of affection, given openly at the table, and it was so unremarkable as a gesture that nobody at that table understood what they had just seen. The text says so plainly. Now no man at the table knew for what intent he spake this unto him. He identified the betrayer by honoring him, and the room read it as ordinary courtesy. And after the sop Satan entered into him, then said Jesus unto him, That thou doest, do quickly. Judas goes, and John ends the sentence with 4 words that do more work than any description could. He then, having received the sop, went immediately out, and it was night. It was night. John has been using light and darkness since his first chapter, and he does not explain it here. He just closes the door and lets the dark stand there. Now the part everything else has been building towards, and it is startlingly brief. And as they did eat, Jesus took bread and blessed and brake it and gave to them and said, Take, eat, this is my body. Consider what those words did in that room, on that night, at that meal. Passover is a scripted meal. It is not an ordinary dinner that happens at a particular time of year. It is a liturgy with fixed foods and fixed questions and fixed explanations, and every man at that table had eaten it every year of his life. The unleavened bread had a meaning, and the meaning was given in a set form. This is the bread of affliction which our fathers ate in the land of Egypt. The bread pointed backwards to the Exodus every single year without exception. And in the middle of the fixed liturgy, at the point where the explanation was supposed to come, he changed it, not backwards to Egypt, to himself. This is my body. That is not a small edit. It is a man taking the national memorial of God's rescue of his people and saying, in effect, that it was about him. Nobody at that table had any category for it, and the Gospels do not record a single question in response, which may be the most telling detail of all. They had stopped being able to keep up. Then the cup. And he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, and they all drank of it. And he said unto them, This is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many. The Passover meal used 4 cups, taken at set points. Most reconstructions place this as the third, the cup of redemption, which follows the meal, and Luke's ordering, likewise also the cup after supper, fits that exactly. And the phrase he attaches to it is covenant language, not ordinary speech. Blood of the New Testament, New Covenant, reaches straight back to Jeremiah, who had promised a day when God would make a new covenant with his people, not according to the covenant made when he brought them out of Egypt, written not on stone, but inward on the heart. So within about a minute, he has taken the two central objects of the meal and reassigned them both, and the second reassignment claims that the covenant of Sinai is being replaced. There is also something missing from every account, and once you notice it, you cannot stop noticing it. Nobody mentions the lamb. A Passover meal has a lamb at the center of it. That is the whole point, an animal killed so that death would pass over the house. All four Gospels describe this supper, 3 of them in detail, and not one records him saying a word about the lamb on the table. He talks about the bread, he talks about the cup. The lamb goes unexplained. You can read that as an accident of reporting. Or you can read it the way John seems to, since John, who never describes the bread and the cup at all, is the one who has the Baptist point at Jesus in the very first chapter and say, "Behold the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sin of the world." And John is also the one who places the crucifixion at the hour the Passover lambs were being killed. And that brings us to the oldest argument about this evening, which is whether it was a Passover meal at all. Matthew, Mark, and Luke say it plainly. Mark, the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover, the disciples ask where to prepare it. The whole scene is set inside the festival. John says something that will not fit with that. He has the priests, on the morning of the crucifixion, refusing to enter Pilate's headquarters lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. If they had not yet eaten it on the morning Jesus died, then the supper the night before was not the Passover meal. And John also dates the crucifixion to the preparation of the Passover, the afternoon the lambs were slaughtered. So one tradition has him eating the Passover and dying the next day. The other has him dying at the hour the lambs died, with the meal happening beforehand. That is a real discrepancy in a document set that is otherwise carefully harmonized, and it has occupied scholars for centuries. The proposed resolutions are worth knowing, because each one tells you something about the world the story sits in. Some argue for different calendars running at once. There is decent evidence that not every Jewish group in the 1st century kept the same reckoning. The community at Qumran used a solar calendar that put festivals on different days from the temple's lunar one. So a Galilean group and the Jerusalem priesthood could genuinely have kept Passover a day apart, both sincerely. Others point out that the sheer logistics forced staggering. Josephus gives numbers for the lambs slaughtered at Passover that, whatever the exaggeration, describe an impossible crush in a single afternoon at a single temple. Some spreading of the observance is likely simply because the building could not process everyone at once. And others take John's dating as theological rather than calendrical, that he has placed the death at the hour of the lambs deliberately, because that is his argument, and that precision of that kind was not what an ancient writer meant by accuracy. I do not think we can settle it, and I would be suspicious of anyone who says they can. But notice that both versions are making the same claim by different routes. The synoptics say he took the Passover meal and put himself at the center of it. John says he died at the moment the Passover lambs were being killed. Neither is arguing that he was near the lamb. Both are arguing that he was it. Now, something happened at that table that the polite retellings tend to leave out. Luke records it in one flat sentence, straight after the bread and the cup. And there was also a strife among them, which of them should be accounted the greatest. An argument about rank, at that meal, after the basin and the towel, minutes after being told that one of them would hand him over. It is almost too on the nose to be invented, which is a decent argument for it being reported rather than composed. 12 men have just watched their teacher wash their feet, and their response is to resume a dispute about seniority, very possibly a dispute about the seating, since the couches were ranked and everyone could see who had been put where. His answer does not scold them. It redefines the currency. The kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them. But ye shall not be so. But he that is greatest among you, let him be as the younger, and he that is chief as he that doth serve. For whether is greater, he that sitteth at meat, or he that serveth? Is not he that sitteth at meat? But I am among you as he that serveth. He is not telling them to want less. He is telling them the scale is inverted and pointing at himself as the evidence, which, given he had just been on the floor with their feet in his hands, was not an abstract claim. Then, a few verses later, one of the odder exchanges in the Gospels. He tells them the situation has changed, that the days of walking into a village and being fed by strangers are over, and that they should now expect hostility. And he says, He that hath no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. They answer, Lord, behold, here are 2 swords. And he says, It is enough. 2 swords between 13 men. On the night, an armed detachment comes to arrest them. As a military preparation, it is absurd, and it is very hard to read the reply as anything but the closing of a conversation that has gone wrong. Enough of this, in the sense of let it drop, which is confirmed within hours, when Peter actually uses one of those 2 swords in the garden, takes a man's ear off, and is told to put it away and heal the damage. If the instruction had been literal, that was the moment it would have been vindicated. Instead, it is countermanded on the spot. And finally, there is Judas, and the question nobody can answer. Why? The Gospels give motives that do not sit comfortably together. John says he was a thief who carried the common purse and helped himself to it, which makes it sordid and simple. Matthew records him asking a price and being weighed 30 pieces of silver, a sum that is itself a quotation, being the compensation set in Exodus for a slave gored by an ox, and the exact figure thrown to the potter in Zechariah. Luke and John both reach past motive entirely and say Satan entered him. And people have proposed kinder theories for 2,000 years, that he was a zealot disappointed by a Messiah who would not fight, that he was trying to force a confrontation and expected Jesus to win it, that he never intended a death at all. The honest answer is that the texts do not tell us, and the loudest evidence against every tidy theory is what he did next. Matthew says that when he saw the sentence, he repented himself, tried to give the money back, was refused, threw it into the temple and hanged himself. Whatever he thought he was buying, it was not that. Which leaves the 2 men who failed him that night side by side, and the comparison is the reason the story keeps its grip. Both betrayed him within hours. Both were sorry. One went out into the dark and ended it. The other wept and was asked 3 times on a beach whether he loved him, and was given the church. The difference was not the size of the failure, it was what each of them did with it afterwards. Then, as the meal winds down, he tells Peter what is coming, and Peter does not believe him. Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for thee, that thy faith fail not. Note the shape of that. He does not say the sifting will be prevented. He says he has prayed that the faith survive it. And then he adds a sentence that assumes the failure and looks straight past it. When thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. Before Peter has denied anything, he has already been given his job for afterwards. Peter answers with the line every one of us would have used. Lord, I am ready to go with thee, both into prison and to death. And gets the plainest possible reply. The cock shall not crow this day, before that thou shalt thrice deny that thou knowest me. Matthew adds that all of them said the same thing. Likewise also said all the disciples. The whole room swore loyalty, hours before the whole room ran. And then, knowing all of it, he spends what is left of the evening comforting them. That is the shape of the next few chapters in John, and it is worth stating plainly, because it inverts what you would expect. The man facing arrest, trial, flogging, and execution before the next Sunday spends his last 3 hours reassuring the people who are about to abandon him. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I will not leave you comfortless. I will come to you. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Every one of those is said to men who will be gone by dawn. He knows it, he has just said so out loud, and he comforts them anyway, in the same register he used with the basin and the towel. He also gives them an image that evening which has outlasted almost everything else he said, and it is agricultural rather than religious. I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine, no more can ye, except ye abide in me. Every man in that room had seen vines pruned. It is not a gentle process. You cut hard, and you cut healthy wood, and a vine that is not cut produces leaf and very little fruit. He uses that, including the uncomfortable half. Every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. The pruning is not punishment for failing. It happens to the branches that are working. And the demand in it is small and total at the same time. Not achieve, not strive. Abide, stay attached. Without me ye can do nothing. Then he promises them something to replace himself, which is the strangest gift in the evening. I will pray the Father, and he shall give you another comforter, that he may abide with you forever. The word behind comforter is parakletos, one called alongside. It carries the sense of an advocate, someone who stands with you when you are in trouble, and the English word comforter has softened it considerably. He is not promising them consolation. He is promising them representation. And he tells them extraordinarily that this is an improvement. It is expedient for you that I go away. For if I go not away, the Comforter will not come unto you. Sit with how that would have sounded. Their entire world is the physical presence of this man. He has just told them he is leaving, that one of them is a traitor and another will deny him, and now he says his departure is to their advantage. There is no record of anyone agreeing. And then, before they leave, he prays out loud in front of them, the longest recorded prayer he ever prays, and almost none of it is about himself. He asks first for the hour that is coming. Then he turns to the 11. I pray for them. I pray not for the world, but for them which thou hast given me. He asks that they be kept, that they be one, that they be protected from the evil. And he says, of the men who are about to scatter, I have kept them, and none of them is lost, but the son of perdition. And then the prayer widens, in a way that ought to stop anyone reading it. Neither pray I for these alone, but for them also which shall believe on me through their word. He is praying in that room hours before the arrest, for people who did not exist yet, for everyone who would ever come to believe any of this, because these 11 frightened men eventually told somebody. Which means the last extended thing he did before walking out to be arrested was to pray for the audience of the story in advance, by name of category, if not of person. Whatever you make of the theology, as a piece of composure, it is almost incomprehensible. Then the meal ends, and Mark records the last ordinary thing that happens. And when they had sung an hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives. They sang. The hymn at the close of Passover was the Hallel, the last part of Psalms 113 to 118, the same collection the crowd had been shouting at him from the roadside 5 days earlier. Which means the last thing he sang, walking out to be arrested, included these lines. The stone which the builders refused is become the head stone of the corner. This is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. And a few verses before it, I shall not die, but live, and declare the works of the Lord. He sang that and walked to the garden. There is one more line, spoken at the very start of the meal, that changes the color of everything that follows it. Luke puts it first, before the bread, before the basin, before any of it. With desire I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. The construction is a Hebrew one, a verb doubled for emphasis, the way you might say I have longed and longed. It is not a polite remark about enjoying company. It is the strongest available way of saying he wanted this. Hold that against what he knew was in the room. He wanted to eat this meal with these 12, one of whom had taken money for him, all of whom would be gone within hours, on the last free evening of his life. Not endured, wanted. And it reframes the foot washing, the bread, the prayer and the singing as things done gladly rather than bravely. There is a version of this evening where a man grits his teeth through a final obligation with people who are about to let him down. That is not the version any of the 4 accounts give. It also explains something about the instruction attached to the bread, which Luke and Paul both record and which is easy to skate past. This do in remembrance of me. He is not only reinterpreting the meal, he is asking them to keep doing it. On the night he is handed over, having just told them the group is about to fall apart, he gives them something to repeat, a physical, repeatable action that requires more than one person and a table. Whatever else that is, it is an assumption that there will be an afterwards. He is issuing an instruction to a community that does not yet exist, about a practice they will keep. On the evening, the 11 of them scatter. And there is a piece of evidence about that instruction which is easy to miss, because it sits outside the Gospels entirely. The earliest written account of this meal is not in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. It is in a letter Paul wrote to the church at Corinth, and most datings put it in the mid-50s, a decade or two before the earliest gospel was written down. For I have received of the Lord that which also I delivered unto you, that the Lord Jesus, the same night in which he was betrayed, took bread. And when he had given thanks, he brake it and said, Take, eat. This is my body, which is broken for you. This do in remembrance of me. Look at the framing. Received and delivered, the standard vocabulary for handing on a fixed tradition, not for reporting news. Paul is not telling the Corinthians something they have never heard. He is correcting how they are doing something they already do, and quoting back to them a formula they already know. Which means that within roughly 20 years of the event, while people who had been in the room were still alive, the words spoken at that table were already a set text, already being repeated in churches hundreds of miles from Jerusalem, already familiar enough that a letter could quote them as a reminder. The reason he brings it up at all is almost comically ordinary. The Corinthians had been holding the meal badly, the wealthy arriving early and eating well, the poor turning up later to nothing, some drunk. Paul's complaint is not liturgical, but social, that a meal whose whole meaning is a man serving the people beneath him had become an occasion for the well-off to eat in front of the hungry. So the very first surviving mention of the Last Supper, anywhere, is somebody pointing out that the church had already got it backwards. That is oddly reassuring, and it says something about the instruction itself. It was given to people who would misunderstand it within a generation, and it survived them. It has now been repeated, in one form or another, every week somewhere in the world for 2,000 years. An unbroken chain of people doing the same small thing with bread and a cup, which began in a borrowed room, arranged by password. On the night the man at the center of it was sold by a friend for the price of a slave. So what do we do with this evening? The first thing is to stop treating the foot washing as an illustration. It is not a lesson attached to the meal. It is the meal's argument performed before it is explained. He tells them what greatness looks like by getting on the floor and only afterwards puts words to it, and the words he chooses are not advice. Ye also ought. The second is Judas, and the temptation to make him a monster so the story is easier. The room could not spot him. 11 men who knew him could not, and when told there was a traitor among them, each suspected himself first. Whatever he did it while looking exactly like everybody else at the table, and he was handed bread as an honored guest by the man he had sold, and still went out into the dark. The third is the thing I keep coming back to, which is the ordering of it all. He knew about Judas before the meal began. He knew about Peter before Peter promised. He knew what the next 18 hours held in detail, and had said so repeatedly to a group who kept not hearing it. And with all of that known, he washed their feet, fed them, comforted them, and sang. There is no version of this evening in which he is surprised, which means every act of tenderness in it was a decision, made with the full information about people who were about to fail him completely. And the fourth is the smallest thing in the room, which is the towel. He laid aside his garments and girded himself with it, and when he had finished, he took his garments again and sat back down. The account bothers to record both halves of that, the putting off and the taking up, as though the writer wanted it understood that this was something he chose to put on and chose to remove, rather than a station he was reduced to. He was never not the person at the head of that table. He simply spent part of the evening on the floor. One of the men at that table had already been paid. He washed his feet first,